Welcome to DeadManTalkings. Tonight's show is a true paranormal encounters and experience. As ever, please do let us know down below in the comments what you thought. Please do like and share and help build the channel and our community further. And of course, don't forget to hashtag TeamFEAR. If you haven't subscribed to the DMT Forest of Fear Army, what are you waiting for? Smack the subscribe button and throat punch the notification bell to stay up to date with all DMT posts and community posts. And without further ado, let's get into tonight's first story by Checkmate09, entitled My Paranormal Stories, Part 1. Let's get straight into that. Hello DMT. I have many experiences with the paranormal and I've told many people them. But I thought I should tell you guys too, since I always get crazy and positive responses when I recount them to others. I'm splitting them up into 3 parts. This part, where I talk about the accounts in the house I lived from ages 12 to 19. Part 2, where I recount all the paranormal experiences from my very first apartment. And Part 3, where I recount the experiences at the summer camp I worked at. Each part has many stories, so read when you have the time, because chances are they'll be long. Parents' Home Stories. Story 1. So my family fostered and adopted children since I was 13. I'm 22 now, and all of the children we fostered have eventually adopted. The only siblings that aren't adopted are my now 18-year-old brother, Ben, and my 16-year-old sister, Hannah. We all used to have our own rooms until we fostered our first little girl, Anna-Rick. Then, me and Hannah shared a room. No biggie. Anna-Rick was 2 when she first lived with us and got a room to herself. After a year of fostering, we got all of the adoption papers and legalities done, and she was now 3. And officially a Morton Thornton, our last name. Nothing crazy happened during the first year, but when Christmas came along, I wanted a Ouija board because I was edgy and super into the paranormal. My parents were not thinking and not believing in that stuff, and they got it for me for Christmas. I was literally so excited and could not wait to play with it with my BFF Caitlin. Since I was only 13, I was stupid and did no research on Ouija boards and did not know the rules. Please, if you are planning on using a Ouija board, please look up and follow the rules. Now, with that out of the way, Caitlin came over and we used it for the first time in the basement. My parents were away and all of the kids were sleeping and we were babysitting. When we used it, we didn't say any type of prayer or good wishes before using it, like you were supposed to. We just went right in. My fingers were barely touching the triangle, and I could see Caitlin's fingers shaking from how lightly she was touching it. So, I know neither of us would have moved it. "Is there anyone there?" I asked. 'Cause how cheesy can it get? The triangle moved and landed on yes. We freaked out. We both shouted, "Was it you? It wasn't me!" at each other, and the triangle moved to spell out, "It was me." "What is your name?" "Roger." "Are you a good spirit?" "No." "Are you a bad spirit?" "Goodbye." Caitlin and I just looked at each other, a little freaked out, but I was still skeptical of her and I could tell she felt the same way about me. We decided to go upstairs and get our pyjamas on and then go back to the basement and watch Step Brothers, which was our favourite movie at the time. We went back downstairs and she turned to the living area and I turned to the laundry room so I could put my dirty clothes in the hamper down there. When I turned to join Caitlin, she was frozen in the doorframe, facing the living area. "Sierra?" I stood beside her and looked in the living area and saw the small blanket I had been using in the middle of the room, floating there. It looked like someone was holding it at the top, as if to present it to us. I was more curious than scared, so I suggested to walk over and see it. I took a step and Caitlin yelled, "Nope!" and ran up the stairs. This scared me so I ran after her. We were hysterical, crying and not wanting to go downstairs. Unfortunately, our food and the movies were down there, so we really didn't have anything to do. So we watched Disney Junior, which was playing on the TV from Anarik's room when she was watching it earlier that night. And we waited for my parents to come home. When they did, we told them what happened, still shaking from the initial encounter. They didn't believe us, and so we told them to go into the basement and to look at the blanket. They did, and after a few seconds, they called us down. "The blanket is on the couch, see?" my dad said. And he was right. The blanket was draped over the side of the couch, clearly not in the same spot I'd left it in, nor in the same spot we saw it no less than an hour before. We had calmed down a little, but we were still freaked out, and so, you know what we did? We grabbed that Ouija board again, and did it all again, because we're idiots. "Roger, was that you?" "Yes." "Why?" "Goodbye." We decided to leave it for now. We didn't know what to believe. We clearly didn't believe each other, but clearly something had been holding that blanket in the middle of the room. We used the Ouija board a few more times, but nothing really came of it. We never heard from Roger through the board again, and we never talked about it to my family after my parents laughed at us. Remember that. No one but my parents knew about the encounter. Remember, okay? Story 2. Do you remember Lalaloopsy dolls? The horribly terrifying dolls with button eyes? Well, Anarik was obsessed with them, especially the pink one. I don't remember her name. Anarik would carry her around everywhere and always slept with her. One night my parents were holding a silent auction, and so I was babysitting. Ben and Hannah were already in bed and I was tucking in Anarik. I gave her a kiss goodnight, and she made me kiss the Lalaloopsy doll goodnight too. So I know she had it when she went to sleep. I went downstairs and did my homework at the dinner table. Then around 10 p.m. I went upstairs to go to bed and I saw the doll on my bed. I assumed Anarik came into my room to sleep with me, realised I wasn't there but accidentally left the doll. I grabbed it, went into her room where she was fast asleep, tucked the doll under her arms and went to bed. At around 2 a.m. I woke up to go to the bathroom. I opened my door and the doll is outside my door. Creepy. But I tried to rationalise it by assuring myself Anarik went to the bathroom and dropped it. I pick it up and put it under her arm again. She's a snoring 3-year-old, absolutely knocked out tired. I close her door and go to the bathroom, and I'm only in there for maybe 30 seconds before I go back to my bedroom. I crawl into my bed and feel something in my bed. I turn on my lamp and see it's the doll. I am so freaked out at this point, all I can do is bring it back to Anarik's room where she's sleeping exactly how I had left her, not even 1 minute before. I close the door and try to go back to sleep. I say try because when my alarm rang at 6:50 a.m, I had not fallen asleep. I asked Anarik if she was doing it and was just a really good actor, and she didn't know what I was talking about and claimed she never left her room that night, proving it by saying that she had peed in the bed that night. So she didn't even get up to go pee. I still have no reasonable explanation for that, and it still freaks me out to this day. That Forest of Fear budgie is one hella annoying budgie. Story 3. When Anarik was 4 or 5, she developed an imaginary friend called Puppy, because it was, in fact, a dog imaginary friend. She would play with it every waking minute of her day. She had a pretend vacuum that she could play with, and every time she would stop, ask Puppy to move, wait a few seconds and say, "Thank you," and keep vacuuming. She would also fall to the ground, writhe around and giggling, saying, "Puppy, get off, stop licking my face," as if a real dog was on her, giving her kisses. Puppy was her best friend except when it came to bedtime. As soon as she was going to bed, she would scream and cry, saying, "Puppy's scaring me," and "Tell him to leave." Every night, we would have to ask Puppy to leave or she wouldn't go to sleep. It was really scary as a 14-year-old to hear your sister scream and cry because of her imaginary friend. One weekend, I heard Anarik talking to someone in her room. "Who are you talking to?" "Puppy." "What are you talking about?" "He's telling me what his name is." "What's his name?" "Roger." I froze, terrified as I remember the last time I had had an encounter with Roger. He also said that you and Caitlin should talk to him with the board again. How did you know about that, Anaric? I didn't. Roger told me to tell you. I ran out the room and read my Bible. I'm not joking. That's all I could do. I was so scared and confused. On Monday, I was ready to tell Caitlin about what I discovered when an 8th grader named Alison came up to me and said, "Is there someone named Roger in your house?" Why? To preface this next part, you should know that my house, along with my whole block, was on the outskirts of a forest. We had all of our backyards fenced off so wildlife wouldn't come and hurt our animals. But it was still spooky. In the forest, there were 2 walking paths, one pavement and one gravel. From the gravel path you could see all of our houses when you looked towards the neighbourhood. I was babysitting. We went for a walk on the walking trail, and the little girl stopped and said we wouldn't walk past that point because it was Roger's territory, and he would get mad. I looked over, and it was right before your house. She wouldn't move any further, and when I dragged her, she started bawling and having a meltdown. "Who's Roger?" I was stunned. I didn't even know what to say. If you remember, no one knows about Roger except Caitlin, who never talked to Alison before, Anaric, who has never met Alison or the girl she was babysitting, and my mum and dad, who have also never met Alison. I don't know who Roger is, but there is something in my house with that name. I would suggest not walking that path anymore, if she got that scared. After that, I prayed over our house every night, and even got my friend's dad, who was our church pastor, to come over one day and pray over and exorcise the house for me too. I don't know who or what Roger was, but he eventually stopped being brought up, and nothing exclusively happened to point him out either. So, I don't know what happened. All the other things that happened in that house were too small to have their own story, like footsteps upstairs when no one's home except for my siblings, who were all in the basement with me. Pictures and paintings falling off the walls, voices when no one else is home, things like that. These are all creepy. These are all the creepy things that happened to me in my home. I have other stories, like I said before, and I will be posting them when I can. Thanks for reading. Sierra. My Paranormal Stories, Part 2. So these stories are all going to be from my very first apartment I lived in. I moved out with my best friend Kelsey when we were 19. It was a 1-bedroom apartment in a really sketchy area, famous in the city for you don't go there. We shared a bed in the apartment, and she was single for the most of it, and my boyfriend lived with himself, so he never stayed over. And so it really worked out in our favour. She has DID, Dissociative Identity Disorder, better known as multiple personality disorder, and schizophrenia. She saw things all the time, but she always knew what was her illness and what wasn't. She knew what to react to internally and externally. For example, she always saw a woman in a dress with an updo sitting at our dinner table, looking at the table. Whenever Kelsey would see her, the lady would turn her head and look at her. She only told me about it once because she knew it was a schizophrenia, and so she wasn't scared or worried about it. Now, with the backstory out the way, here's all the stories from that apartment. Story 1. Kelsey and I had a kitten we named Twitchy. She was so cute and playful. There was only really one story that I remember with her, and it mostly happened to Kelsey. We only had her for 4 months before we had to give her away because our landlord had a problem with her, even though we were allowed cats. So this is the only story with her in it. In our living room, we had a futon that always had a large blanket over it, so when Twitchy went under it, we could see a little lump where she was. I was sitting at the dinner table doing stuff for work, and she was playing with Twitchy on the futon. All of a sudden, she turned to me with a stunned look on her face and said my name. What? Something weird just happened. What happened? I saw a lump in the blankets and assumed it was Twitchy. I started padding the blanket to play with her, and she followed my hands under the blankets. But when I got to what I thought was her, she wasn't there. But the lump was in the middle of the futon, so she couldn't have run away without me seeing. I looked under the futon, and she's fast asleep. I went over, and she was right. Twitchy was laying on her side, eyes half open where you can only see her whites, like as true, sleeping kitty. There was no way she could be pretending to sleep. She was a kitten, not that bright. We still don't know what Kelsey was playing with, but it wasn't anything alive. Story 2. The way our apartment was laid out, when we sat on the couch and turned to our left, we could see the dining room, the garbage can and half the stove. And when we looked to our right, we could see out into the parking lot. To get to our room, we had to walk down a small hallway, and so we couldn't see the door from the living room unless you stood in the archway between the living room and dining room. So Kelsey and I were sitting on the couch watching TV when we both, for some reason, turned to look in the dining room area. When we looked, we saw our garbage can fall over. We looked at each other at the same time and said, "What the hell?" We both got up and went over to see what was going on. We didn't have Twitchy anymore, so it wasn't her, and no windows were open. Even if we did have a window open, it wouldn't have fallen the other way because of where the window was located. We both just put the garbage back in a bin and stood it back up. We went back to watching TV, and this time we heard a noise coming from the dining room. We both looked over and saw the garbage can slide across the floor a few inches before falling over, like someone was pushing it away from them. We both stared in silence for a good 30 seconds before Kelsey looked over at me. "You saw that too, right?" she asked. "Yeah. I don't even know what to say." We both got up again, and this time I took the garbage out even though it was only half full. And then we went to the bar a block away to get our mind off it. This is the first story of me seeing something move in that apartment. It's definitely not the last. Story 3. After 6 months of living together, Kelsey moved back in with her parents due to her mental health declining and needing her family. When she moved, Malcolm, my boyfriend, moved in with me since it was closer to his work, and because I couldn't afford to live by myself. I have one more story when Kelsey lived with me, but that one is by far the craziest, so I'm saving it for the last. This story consists of 3 separate occasions, but are too short to have their own story. In our apartment during the summer, it got way too hot to even think, and at the time I couldn't afford air conditioning. And so what we did was put small freezers in a Ziploc bag and put them behind a fan so that the air was cold. It worked for the time, and so we had it in our room at all times. One day, Malcolm and I were watching TV when we heard our door slam shut. We never had the windows open because it was always too hot, and so we knew it wasn't a wind or draft. I was a little bit freaked out because I don't know how it ended up on the bed or how the fan turned off or how the door slammed shut. We just went about our day and the Ziploc bag never moved again. The other time something moved with my boyfriend, and it was a few weeks later. This specific event happened twice, actually. Both times we were in the bathroom, either on our phones or folding laundry. To preface, we had 2 bookshelves, one beside our TV and one beside the entrance to the dining room. Both in the living room. Both had a lip on the top, so if you put anything on the top, you just couldn't slide it off. You had to lift it and then take it off. We kept board games on the one side, beside the TV, and blocks that spell love on the second one. When we would go out, we would see the board games on the ground, including the ones you would have to lift up to get off. We would also see Wii games. That would be across the room from the Wii stand. We never really talked about it because we were too freaked out, but we never really got answers. The last story under Things Moving is the one with the most people present to witness it. Kelsey and her 2 friends, Carson and Bianca, were over and we were playing beer pong. I was on a team with Bianca and Kelsey and Carson were on a team. Kelsey threw the ball into the living room and made a noise much too loud and chaotic to be a ping pong ball. when I found the ball in the middle of the living room. The V and the E from love were beside the ball. Impossible to happen because they were across the room from the bookcase they were on, and the bookcase was up against the wall, so the ball couldn't have knocked them off. They were just in the middle of the floor. I was so freaked out, but no one believed me and told me I was acting a fool. I know what I saw, and it's still something that I think about to this day. Story 4. This last story is the craziest story of them all, and the craziest thing to happen to me, personally. It was the last night Kelsey was living with me, and she was going to sleep in the living room, so I had the bed to myself. It was a super hot night, so I was sleeping naked, with a very thin blanket over me for some coverage. I was sleeping facing the wall on the edge of the bed, and I felt the blanket touch my lower back, like a cat was pawing a blanket. I just assumed it was the blanket settling, so I didn't pay any attention. Then it happened again, but with more force, like a child was pressing on my back to get my attention. I whipped around and obviously didn't see anything. I got so freaked out, I got on my pyjamas and slept on the couch with Kelsey. And to this day, I still have a fear of sleeping on the edge with my back showing. Now, this next true story that was sent over to me is the first of 3 by a person who would like to remain anonymous. In a story simply entitled, I Work in a Haunted Hotel. Let's get straight into that. I live in Canada, Alberta. I won't say where as to keep my privacy. I have been working in a Super 8 hotel for over 6 years. I don't mind cleaning rooms and get to meet interesting people. I get to work at my own pace and bug the rest of the staff. Before I get into the story, I will share a little bit about my background. My family have always been sensitive to ghosts. I will randomly see whitish clear shadow figures, be it animal or human. Even my father has come running into the house on the farm and claim he has seen our dog, who had died many, many years ago. Our dog did not want Dad to go near the shop one day, and so Dad came into the house claiming he'd seen our dog. Not even 10 minutes later, we heard a huge crash, a loud one, and we rushed outside to see what had happened. A tree had fallen onto the shop and caved in one side. Another event I experience now and then is my cat, who had passed away a very long time ago. I could still feel him jump onto my bed, no matter where I lived at the time. If I had a rough day, he would visit me. Another is when we were about to move into an old schoolhouse, remodelled into a home. My uncle and his friends were in the basement cleaning up a flood when they heard a bunch of old people talking. When they looked up, they'd seen 4 old people playing cards in a corner of the basement, and they booked it out of the house. There is a burn mark that appears and disappears in the dining room. There were only a few times we've experienced ghosts. Working in a hotel, you hear and see things that others wouldn't believe. We have neatly stacked 2 pillows on a desk against the wall, secure, while cleaning, and we would randomly see or find them across the room when no one else had been around, and I can't explain why they were tossed around the room while we were in the room. To me, this was just ghosts playing games. It takes a lot to spook me. We would see shadowy figures come up the stairs on the far side of the hotel by the restaurant. Another time, we would see our bags on the cart swaying like someone had just battered them when no one else was around, and the air was still. I'm not the only one who sees things going on. Anyways, one day, I was upstairs in room 205, and while I was making beds, I had a feeling I was not alone. I expected to see a co-worker trying to pop around the corner to scare me or jump out at me, as we do to each other to keep things interesting and not so bleh. What I'd seen was not what I expected. The wall between 205 and 207 had disappeared, and I was looking directly into the other room. I'd seen a lady in white lace dress and a bonnet that framed her face from like the 1930s or so. There was fresh blood flowing down the front of her dress. I could smell the iron smell of blood. She was about 10 paces away from me. I knew if I looked away, she would disappear, and so I kept my eyes on her and asked if I could help her. She tilted her head up to me, looked shocked, as if no one had noticed her all of these years. Her throat was slashed, and her head flopped right back to her chest, like her head was almost removed from the slash. "I can't find my baby. Where is he?" She held up her hand, palm up, as if asking me to return her baby. I told her, "I don't know where he is. What's his name?" And at that moment, I heard a gasp from the doorway. I looked to see who had seen us. Another housekeeper asked me, "Who are you talking to?" As she looked around, at that moment I realised I had taken my eyes off the lady and turned to look, and the wall between the rooms was back, and the lady in white was gone. I told the other housekeeper what had happened, and she didn't believe me. A few years have gone by since this, and I thought it was the end of sightings. I was wrong. One day I was working alone the whole day. I was not in a good mood, as I was alone. Had over 25 rooms to do, and while I was cleaning the same room, 205, I heard a lady sigh behind me, thinking a customer had found me and wanted me to do something for them and interrupt my day as I was limited for time. I seen the same lady in a white dress and bonnet. The wall between the rooms had disappeared again. I asked her if she found her baby. She raised up her right arm, and I seen a dead, limp baby dangling from her arm. I frowned, and then seen the blood on the front of her dress was from the throat that had been slit, and from her baby, who was white from the loss of blood. Don't ask me how ghosts could bleed, but it's what I've seen. She asked me in a very shaky voice, "Did you find my husband's hunting knife?" I asked her if that was what happened. Had her husband killed them? I regret asking this, as the lady had hugged the baby and fled out the door. I ran behind her to see. Nothing. They were gone. I don't know how to find the history of the hotel and how long it's been built for, and or if there was a building before the hotel. I don't know what to tell the lady if or when I see her again. We will randomly hear people in a hotel when it's empty. Things will be moved or flying around across a room. I work in a haunted hotel, and I don't mind it. A second story is sent over by my anonymous friend with another paranormal sort of feel to this one, guys. Without further ado, let's get straight into that. This actually happened to me. I had met a lady at work, and she was a great co-worker and soon turned friend. I was invited to go to her place for an evening of card games and girl talk and just random topics. I had stopped to pick up some ginger ale and went to her place. It was an older house, 2-floor, 1 bathroom, 2 bedroom. I didn't think twice about this, since this town had a lot of older houses. The porch was wooden and a bit worn on some of the boards. When you entered the house from the back, you walked into the kitchen. The hallway led into the bathroom on the left and 1 bedroom on the right. On the right beside the bedroom was a door that led into the basement. And going past was the living room, and on the right was the other bedroom. We were sitting in the kitchen at the table, and we spent about 2 hours shooting the breeze and having fun. I heard something fall in the bathroom and asked her if her son had returned home, and she said no. We were the only ones in the house. We shrugged, and as I went into the car to get my ginger ale and returned and seen she'd got on the cards for the card game, we were having fun and laughing, and I was razzing her as normal. All of a sudden, I felt someone punch me on the back, on the left side, and knock the wind out of me. And I felt hands on the back of my head bashing my head against the table. My friend had a look of shock on her face, asking me if I was all right. I shook my head and asked again if we were alone. She confirmed this, and we left the house. I asked her if we were alone, and then who assaulted me. She did not know what happened, as she cleaned the wound on my cheek and temple. I asked her the history of the house, and she paused. And when I looked at her face, she had a look of pure shock. She had told me that years ago there was a guy who lived there, and he was a cranky old coot. He would yell at people who walked by and would just touch his lawn, and was a bit of a pack rat. He had depression and had shut himself in the bathroom. I told her that he did not like us in the house, laughing and having fun in his house. I told her of how my family was very sensitive to spirits. My dad had seen our dog, who had passed away about 20 years before, leading him away from the shop and back towards the house, then disappeared around the apple tree. Dad had went into the house to tell us of the story, and we heard a crash by the shop. The tree had fallen onto the shop, and Dad would have been injured if it weren't for the dog. And my sister and Mum and I were going to town one day. I had totally spaced out for about 5 minutes on the drive when I collected my senses, and I refocused. My sister was screaming. Mum had stopped the car, and my sister said she'd seen a man in black and white, a suit with a top hat and a really sad look, shaking his head on the other side of the road. Mum had not seen this and would explain why I had spaced out. I was not meant to see it. When we got to town, we got the bad news that a family friend's son had died in a vehicle accident. There were so many times my family had experienced ghosts and spirits. My friend distracted me enough with her own stories, and when I had recovered from my attack, I had went home. After a couple of weeks had passed, she came up to me at work one day and told me her 4-year-old granddaughter had been pulled off the couch where she was watching TV and had bruises in the shape of a handprint. I told her to get out of that house. It wasn't safe. I only returned to this house one more time after this, and it was for a very short period, not even for an hour. Shortly after all of this, she had moved. Here's the third and final encounter sent over by my anonymous friend. And without further ado, let's get straight into that. Here is a story about my Wendigo encounter. I was living on a farm when I was 9 years old. We lived in an old school house, haunted, but that's another story. We lived about 10 kilometres from our neighbour, with lots of trees across country and over half an hour from town. Being a kid on a farm, with lots of room, I was always exploring the bush, or being with our horses and cows. We had chickens, pigeons, rabbits, peafowl, pigs, pheasants, turkey, geese, and many other birds. I was on my way to go find the horses this day. I was always with Tony, our lead horse. She was a white horse with a black mane and a tail. She was more of a foster mother to me, and I could do things with her others would just be amazed. Tony and I had a very close bond. I could climb up onto her tail and nip onto her back as she just grazed. I could just climb up her neck, since she was a tall horse for 9 years old, even cling and run around her legs. I could hide under her when I was near her, and if it started to rain, just as a fowl would do. We used to play tag, hide and seek, and so many other games. She loved playing. This is why I was on my way to see her this day. I wanted to be with my best friend. Before you say little kids should not be outside without supervision, this was very common for me, since I even slept outside with the animals I loved and helped care for. I was raised if you are quiet, you will see things you normally would miss. I was always quiet to see what wildlife I could find. 2 steps and pause and listen. 2 steps, pause and listen. I can't remember where our German Shepherd was, but it was not with me on this trip. When I started my trip, I knew I was probably in it for a long walk, since she was probably on the other side of the property and across the lake. I crossed the pasture close to the house, finding nests, interesting rocks. Crossing the pasture to the tree line took me about 15 minutes, listening to what kind of bird and what kind of song, what kind of animal may have crossed through. You can always find out what kind of things are going on around you, if you pay attention. As I entered the tree line, things went quiet. So quiet you could hear your own heartbeat. I didn't think much of this, since I probably disturbed the wildlife. No birds sang or put up a fuss as I got closer to them. There was no breeze or very still air. The air felt thick. Since I was like 9 years old, I thought it was from the morning dew evaporating. Most of the trees in the bush were maple or fir. I knew there was a hawk nest nearby, to the left and near the top of the maples. There was a fox den in the ditch about 10 steps to the right, and the babies had not come out of the den since they were just little at this time. This was probably the foxes that had taken a few of our chickens, but I was never mad since our hens always had babies each spring. I understood that even they had to eat, and would only come to human areas if they had no other food source. Things were silent. Not a bird or a fox bark. I checked on the robin's nest to see if they were all right. As I peeked into the nest, the babies were awake but very silent, and didn't move but for the blink of their eyes. I moved back onto the cow trail, and I got the feeling something wasn't right. No animals, no birds, not even a sound of my footsteps on the path. I moved very slowly towards the meadow that was just 500 meters from where the tree line started. I was very slowly and very quietly making my way. Halfway through the bush, I smelled it first. Rotten flesh mixed with a skunk and a really bad smell of death. It's amazing how fast your senses will get used to the smell, and you go nose blind. I looked around and didn't see anything. No movement. And so I kept going, hoping to get through the smell. As I got to the exit of the trees, there was a meadow that always has deer. But this day, I got more than I bargained for. I heard grunting and growling, mixed with a really rough voice that someone had a really bad sore throat. I couldn't make out the words as I was still too far to understand. I stopped to listen, and as I could hear snarling, growling of some kind of a big animal, it didn't sound like a bear or even a moose grunting. I lay down on the ground, thinking I could sneak up and see what kind of animal was making this sound. I peeked through the trees and into the meadow, and I'd seen something. I didn't know what it was. I had seen 3 creatures that almost looked like really big deer, but with their flesh rotting off in batches. I could see ribs and bones as the flesh was missing. Other parts like brown hair mixed with really bad case of mange. The big one had big antlers with many points, and there was a skin or something that was shedding off of the antlers and waved or fell off in pieces as it moved. Long ears like a donkey. The side of the face had no skin at all and was bare yellowish bone. It was standing on its hind quarters as if a human, but a bit of a hunch. This one was doing the most grunting and growling. It was watching the smaller 2 and randomly pointed with its hands. It had hands with long claws, or more like talons. The hair that this one had on its body was black. The skin was a dark brown. This one was circling the other 2 slowly. I was expecting this one to join in the attacks. The hind legs were that of a big dog, but they had hooves that I'd seen while they were circling. I was not close enough to see the eyes, but I did not want to get closer to all of this. The smaller black one had a smaller set of antlers, like a young deer, 8 points at least, but this one was a lot more meaner to the smallest of the 3. Its body was lean and it was quick. It moved in flashes, and when it paused it took swipes and bites at the smallest. It was trying to use its hands with long claws and teeth, and trying to attack the smaller brown one. I'd seen chunks of flesh being ripped off the smallest one, who could only not fight back, as well as the other 2. Its hands and claws were dripping in blood, and flesh hung from its claws in chunks. The smallest one of the 3 was brown with a 3-point antler. Only one. Its flesh was bleeding profusely from its wounds. It snarled and bared its teeth while trying to fend off the attacks. There was broken bones hanging out of the flesh, and the blood was so bright against its hair and skin. I could see the blood dripping from where the missing antler was ripped out or broken in a fight. This one was not upright like the other 2. This one was on all fours, low to the ground and having trouble trying to get powerful kicks in as the attacker, or a swipe. I'd seen the right hind leg and had most of its flesh ripped off already, and a broken leg. I could see the bone on the lower leg sticking out and bending awkwardly. There was not much time before I knew this was a losing battle. I must have gasped at the sight when the big brown one perked its ears and turned to me. Its eyes narrowed when its gaze focused on me. I'd seen the eyes at this moment. They were bright yellow, as if there was a light behind them, almost a bright fluorescent yellow. It didn't take its eyes off me, and when it said in a really rough voice, it said, "Leave. Go." I thought it was talking to me, but I was frozen in fear. I'd seen the two big ones run off into the trees and disappeared, leaving a third behind. I was not going to approach. I was too scared to run, but just as I was about to move, I'd seen the small one lift its head to look at me. It growled and snarled and slowly moved to where I was. I froze and I couldn't move, even held my breath. I'd seen this creature moving for me, and I couldn't move. I could see its breath now, and instead of white steam, it was pink from all the blood. Hearing a horse calling out, I looked up to the right and seen a horse coming running towards me with her head down and in an attack mode. Her nostrils flared and she was almost screaming out. After everything was so silent for so long, her calls were so loud, it echoed in my head. I was not sure if I was going to be killed by a beloved horse or the last creature heading for me out in the open now. I felt doom and danger and fear. I dropped flat to the ground and called to our horse with the herd in tow. I have never seen them run so fast. The sound of their hooves pounding the ground, which sounded hollow at this point. I had seen our horse herd up about 8 horses in all, heading straight for the creature. I'd seen our horse attack the creature. The first one to reach the creature reared up as the other surrounded the creature in a half circle and almost blocking my view. But I could see between the constant moving legs to see the creature stand up and snarl and snap at the horses. I turned my head to the lead horse, Tony. She came running with her head down and slow to stand next to me, gently talking to me as if she was comforting her foal. I stayed where I was as I seen the horse herd drive off the creature. They stayed on the attack till they were all out of sight. I hugged Tony's legs as I couldn't stand for fear yet. I had seen her lift her head to call the herd. I was shaking so bad, breathing heavily. I said thank you for saving my life when I really needed her. She let me take my time to calm down and never let go of her. When I was able to stand, she guided me home slowly. As I'd seen the other horses putting up a fuss, bucking and prancing, tossing their heads around as they ran back to their leader. I was scared of what was in the woods. It wasn't until I was home to ask Mum what the creatures were I'd seen in the woods. I described them to her as much as possible. I was told deer or elk and not to talk of it ever again. The next day after school, I went out to the same meadow, sucker for punishment, I know. I had to see for myself if what I'd seen had really happened. I had seen blood-stained grass and dirt from where the fight had taken place. When I was an adult and watching movies and hearing stories on YouTube, I realised what I'd seen and what could have happened to me when I was 9 years old, when the horses saved my life. It's still creepy to recall this, knowing that these creatures were less than 5 kilometres from our house. Wow, absolutely awesome and terrifying stuff there. Thank you so much to both of my amazing subscribers and friends for sending over their true stories, their experiences and encounters. Guys and girls, you know the drill. As ever, please do let me know down below in the comments what you thought. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And of course, don't forget to hashtag TeamFEAR. Got quite a few more true encounters, dogman, skinwalkers and alike coming up over the next few days as we lead our way up to the wonderful Halloween celebrations. Of course, if you yourself have a strange encounter or experience or sighting that didn't quite make rational sense or you couldn't believe your eyes or ears, then please do get it over to me at dmtforesterfear.com and go to the submit report or story page. I hope you're all well and happy and looking forward to the end of the week, and above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.